For weeks now, I've been travelling around this extraordinary country, from Derry to Derby, from Edinburgh to Peterborough, Woking, Warrington, Wigan, and everywhere I've been listening to you. And what I've heard again and again is that what people feel they need in this country, what they need in this country is leadership. And people are asking why, at this moment, I wish to take up this poison chalice. I keep hearing again and again. Why on earth would you want to be Prime Minister at the moment? What a terrible time to be Prime Minister. But it is exactly now that we have to make a choice of two different paths in our country. We stand at a crossroads. On the one hand is a choice of something that I don't want to call populism. I don't want to call it populism because I believe in people, right? The reason I'm here, the reason I listen to you, the reason I talk to you is that I believe in listening to people and talking to people. I believe in people. I hate the fact that this word populism has been taken by the other side. I think the choice is instead a choice on the one hand of fairy story, and on the other hand, of the energy of prudence, of seriousness, of realism that is going to make this so much a better, so much a happier country. And although I'm going to speak today almost entirely about what I love about this country, almost entirely about the ways in which this country can be so much better than it currently is, I'm going to start with that great prancing elephant in the room in this big circus tent. I'm speaking not about the leading leadership contender here. I'm speaking. The great prancing elephant in the tent is, of course, this vision that I don't call populism, but I call negativism, summed up in that phrase, no deal. But it's not just no to a deal, it's no to everything. It's no to Europe. It's no to trade. It's no to Parliament. It's no to reality. And we're not a no country. This country's greatness, your greatness, in your individual lives, in your families, in your businesses, and the charities you work in, is founded not on the word no, but on the word yes. And it's a yes that's founded in reality. Because underlying all these stories that the other candidates are putting forward that masquerade as optimism is a failure to grasp reality. What they are telling you is fairy stories. They're giving you exactly what I read every evening to my 2-year-old and my 4-year-old in bed if I'm ever released from Parliament in time. And it's always the same story. Right, sometimes the villain is the Gruffalo. At this particular moment, the villain appears to be the elites and the establishment in Europe, but the story is the same. The story is there is some benighted victim, there is some great scapegoat who's responsible for all our ills, and there's some secret, magical path which you're going to be led on through this great prophet who's going to lead you to the uplands. But this prophet is not a real prophet. It is a prophet of negativity. It is a prophet of the no. It is the great word of all the false prophets through the ages. Because in fact, the way that you change the world is being honest to the way the world is. The way that you change your family, the way you change your business, the way we change this country, is to begin by loving this place, loving it in its reality, loving it in its sense, its deep sense. I'm going to give up on this podium. I can't be bothered with this podium, right? Loving it in all its sense of mystery, of difficulty, of diversity, of difference. No one of us in this audience, of course, is remotely the same. Locked in all our brains, there's millions of different views. And that is the energy of this country. And that energy of action begins with an energy of prudence. Right? A very unfashionable word, but then I'm a conservative, a very unfashionable thing at the moment, right? And I'm a conservative because I believe in prudence. One of the fundamental things that distinguishes my campaign from the other campaigns is I do not believe in promising what we cannot deliver. Right? I do not believe in pretending that you're going to get some new deal out of Europe before the 31st of October. I don't believe in pretending that there is something called no deal that you're going to be able to drive through Parliament. I don't believe in promising money that we don't have. I don't believe in the £84 billion worth of tax cuts that the other candidates have already offered in this race, right? I do not believe in pledging £42 billion to a single department. I believe in living within our means. I believe in being honest about the fact that if we are sensible and thoughtful and serious as a country, there will be some more money to spend. And I believe in being honest about the fact that my priorities are education, our infrastructure, a broadband, a productivity, our rail lines in the north, but that we can only spend that money if we have that money, because we live in reality, not in fairy tales. So first, the energy of prudence. Secondly, what is lacking in this debate and in our politics is the energy of shame. We need a sense of shame. We need to feel shame. Our politics must begin from a sense of shame. We must begin by looking at things and saying, this is not good enough. The broken windows in our prisons are not good enough. The piles of garbage in our prisons are not good enough. The drugs flowing into our prisons are not good enough. When I see an 88-year-old woman looking after a doubly incontinent 93-year-old man, it is not good enough. Right? And embedded in that sense of shame is a very simple, very powerful question, which if I am lucky enough to be Prime Minister, lucky enough to be your Prime Minister, because I would be your Prime Minister, not just the Conservative Party's Prime Minister, not just the members of Parliament Prime Minister, but your Prime Minister, I would have one simple question put above every desk of every civil servant in this country, which is, would you be proud to put your mother or your brother or yourself in this hospital, in this school, in this prison? Would you be proud to bring someone from another country and say, this is Britain. This is the way that we do things in this country. Do you feel a sense of pride or do you feel a sense of shame? Which brings me to the next energy, which is the energy of seriousness. Seriousness, right? We are a serious country. We should be a serious country. But being serious means being serious about our national security, being serious about our intelligence services, being serious about our National Security Council, being serious about what it means to change the world, and being dignified in our government, being dignified in our parliament, by reaching out to the world and saying, come, see our chamber, see our debates, sit with me in the National Security Council and challenge every country on earth to match our level of intelligence, our level of integrity, our level of seriousness. The next energy which we need to find is the energy of action. Leadership is about listening. Leadership is about vision. But above all, leadership is about getting things done. Right? Leadership is about doing things. It's about action. It's not good enough. I felt this when I was Prisons Minister. It's not good enough to sit around a table and debate great abstract questions of prison policy when your prison is filthy. Which is why my philosophy of action, what I loved about working with prison officers, what I loved about working with prison governors, is it isn't about the talk. It's about sorting it out. It's not just about my standing up and saying the violence in prisons is unacceptable. 32,000 people a year are being assaulted in our prisons. 10,000 prison officers a year are being assaulted in prisons. But that I am going to sort it out. And sorting it out means exactly that. I'm going to resign if I do not reduce the violence in these prisons. I'm going to set up an ops room. I'm going to put the 10 most challenged prisons up on the wall. I'm going to bring in a brigadier, and we're going to sit down once a week, and we're going to go through them, number by number, line by line, until those prisons are sorted out. I'm going to invite, and this is what I did, the prison governors up to my house in Scotland so we could spend 2 days talking, walking, going through those prisons. I spent a day at Wormwood Scrubs shadowing a prison officer to see from morning through to night exactly what happens when the cell inspection takes place, exactly whether you've checked the call bell, the night light, the daylight, the screw, the bolt, the skin, and in the end, if we achieved it, it was not about me. The fact that I didn't need to resign, the fact that we reduced prison violence by 16% over 3 months was not about me. It was about the prison officers. It was about the governors there in Leeds, in Wormwood Scrubs, in Wealdstone, in Humber, in Hull. Dedicated public servants who have to be teachers and mentors, psychiatrists who have to cut people down who've tried to hang themselves, who have to put up with abuse day in, day out, and who are still working to change people's lives and protect the public, because in the end, this country is about action. Now, that then comes to my final point about energy. The energy to change this country is also about conviction. Conviction, right? In the end, the problem with a lot of these candidates, I feel, is that it feels as though their policies have been generated either from a think tank or from some kind of focus group. But when I say to you, I want this country to be fairer, to be greener, and to be more united, it is because I feel these things. Right? Why do I want it to be fairer? But I want it to be fairer because I had to sit there with an 80-year-old woman who had watched her daughter murdered and raped in front of her, and who had then been raped herself by somebody that had been released from one of our prisons. That's why I want this country to be fairer. I want this country to be fairer because of that 88-year-old woman looking after the 93-year-old doubly incontinent man. I want this country to be fairer because of the face I see of a mentally ill, agoraphobic person opening the door to me when I knock on that door, and that sense of despair, the sense of a country that has no place for somebody. I want this country to be greener because I love this landscape. I love this country. I began to love this country through the soil. The reason I want to plant 100 million more trees is that I myself have planted 5,000 trees, stuck my hand in the earth, teased out the roots, squeezed it into the soil, tubed it, protected it, staked it, and if I say farmers can work with me to get 100 million more trees in the ground over 4 months, that's because I know how to plant a tree. And if I say this country should be more united, it is, of course, in part because I sat there in Iraq, as indeed did other people in this room, because I'm very, very lucky here today that I have people in this room who served in the military when I was in Iraq, who served as civilians with me in Iraq, and like me, lived through division, lived through conflicts between tribes, between Sunni and Shia. There are people in this room who served with me in the Balkans, who saw the conflicts between Serbs and Bosnians. But for me, I believe in unity because I'm a Scot. I represent an English border constituency. Were the United Kingdom to break apart, I would, quite literally, have no country. I would have no idea who I was representing. I would have no idea what my identity was. So when I say I want this country to be green, to be fair, to be united, this isn't something that comes from a focus group or from a policy paper. it comes from conviction. I've been thinking a little bit recently about my father, because it's been the D-Day celebrations, and I went with my father to the Normandy beaches. And my father was an extraordinary man. He was a sort of slightly comical, exaggerated Scottish figure. He swathed himself in tartan. Even in Vietnam, he wore tartan trousers, right? This is a man who organized sword dances in Shanghai and Kuala Lumpur, right? This is a man whose passionate love of the United Kingdom seemed to be largely based on the fact that he liked teasing the English and would have been heartbroken if there had been no English to tease. He was also a man deeply, deeply conservative, deeply romantic about his family and his regiment. I remember him flying halfway around the world to see me during my very, very brief period as a young officer in the Black Watch, to watch me marching on a Remembrance Day parade in the rain in Market Drayton in Shropshire. I remember him flying again halfway around the world, later in my life when I was based with a military unit in the Balkans, trying to offer his help, slightly unsuccessfully, to help us catch a war criminal. He was then 80 years old, right? That's the kind of man he was. But what I remember most of standing on the Normandy beaches with him was his anger with his commanding officer. And this really surprised me, because he loved the army, he loved his regiment, and yet he was absolutely furious. And I'm going to finish with this, because it sums up what I'm trying to talk about the choice that we face. The choice that we face between one way of seeing the world and another, between one view of Britain and another, one vision of reality and another. My father had been a battle school instructor, and for those of you old enough to remember that, that meant that he spent a lot of time, inspired by General Montgomery, going around throwing whiz-bangs at people, making them learn how to fire a maneuver. So fire a maneuver means you hide in the hedgerow, you crawl along the ground, you provide covering fire, and you move in small little units. And they arrived on the Normandy beaches after he'd spent 2 years as a battle school instructor, and his commanding officer, on their first advance against the Germans, announced that they were going to have none of that. Instead, they were going to march line abreast across the field as though they were at Waterloo, straight into the German machine guns. The entire company was killed or wounded before they were a quarter of a way across that field. And I realized from that why it is my father always said that courage was not the opposite of cowardice, but that courage was the golden mean between cowardice and foolhardiness. That courage drew, like all the best politics of Britain, like all the best politics of the Conservative Party, out of an unflinching ability to face reality. Courage is about using the hedgerows. And in the end, if I have one message to you on the choice that we're all going to face as members of Parliament, as members of the Conservative Party, and ultimately if I'm lucky enough to stand in a general election and get the vote of people in this room who are not members of the Conservative Party, the choice is quite simple. It's a choice between fantasy and reality, between a fairy story and a concrete idea of what it means to embody the dignity of this country. It's a choice of who you want to have as your leader. Our country is embodied in its leaders. Your reputation, your pride, your courage is embodied in your leaders. There was a time when this country was known for King Canute's attitude towards the reality of a rising flood. There was a time when this country was known through King John's attitude to Parliament. There was a time when this country was known from Henry VIII's attitude to family values. But there was a time also when this country was known for the dignity and seriousness of Gladstone. When this country was known, the height of the Second World War, for the astonishing, exuberant genius of Winston Churchill, and for the quiet dignity with which Attlee conducted himself in the years after the war. And in your choice, you will be making a choice between one vision of Britain and another. And the vision that I want to bring you with me to achieve is a vision of a leader who listens, of a leader who will walk, I promise you, through every county in the United Kingdom, listening and walking day by day and sharing with you the energy that comes from prudence, the energy that comes from shame, the energy that comes from seriousness, the energy that comes from action, the energy that comes from conviction, the wisdom of practical judgment which provides the only path towards making this a much better and much happier nation. Thank you very much indeed.